for his first theory, this is good. Maybe William Afton isn't responsible for all of the kills and murders. Maybe some of them were the Mimic pretending to be William Afton. That's just my little game theory. Generic intro into that goes me. We're back with another FNAF game theory video, and today we're doing FNAF the Circus of Horrors. This video was uploaded 8 hours ago, which is perfect time for me. 600,000 views in 8 hours is a mind-boggling amount of views, but this is the first show. It's talking about a circus. I'm not sure what FNAF stuff has come out recently, but this is going to be the very first game theory FNAF video I have watched since MatPat has retired, so it's probably going to take a little bit getting used to. I've been doing the Minecraft game theory videos for the past couple weeks, but whenever they upload a new FNAF video, I jump into that, so it should be interesting to see what they talk about. In this one, it's a little bit longer of an episode. You can check out my reaction to the last one, which was MatPat's final what was it, final FNAF game theory video. I'll leave it right up there. Also link down below description. Also in a place on my channel with all my other game theory FNAF reactions going in chronological order. It's been quite the interesting journey so far, and I'm really excited to watch more and see how the new host is doing, and hopefully, you know, the views have been steady and the game theorist channel is going strong with everything they have going across the board now that MatPat is taking more of a back seat. But shout out to the patrons because they get all the videos there early at 11 of our Patreon channel. I read every single one in comments, leave them down below, whether you're a patron or not, whether you're subscribed or not. But let's go ahead and jump into the Circus of Horrors. All right.
Fredbear's Family Day.
That's an accent.
This
I knew it was
is
British,
where it all
but
began. The animatronic empire. The
first time since Matt retired.
William's descent into man.
Everything. These some shoes to fill.
One location, or at least that's what we all thought until today.
I mean, if Matt has faith that he can take over.
Welcome to Game Theory, where
that's enough for me.
Finally time. Today, I graduate from FNAF boy to FNAF man and take on my very first FNAF theory.
Yep.
Although I say that, I have actually been helping Matt write FNAF theories for the past 3 years.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks,
Have
Matt.
to have a safe flight back.
Bye.
I didn't get to talk to you about Gregory as a robot. It's all right.
Okay.
I mean, to be fair, that was both of our sin, but you know.
I threw something out, my first FNAF theory, I threw something out
Yeah, Gregory's robot, first FNAF theory, and look how well received it's been.
there. Look how good that's gone for all of us.
It's done so well for all of us.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? But don't worry, theorists.
Have anybody noticed how the channels are doing since Matt retired?
Crazy, hopefully. Because
Like
today,
all of them?
I'm going to be tackling one simple,
I've been doing the Minecraft
tiny detail
theories.
that I think is really important to understanding this franchise. Help Wanted 2 was full of collectibles, most of which you get from a prize machine after you beat a minigame. Some are set prizes that relate
that
to
is
the level you just
unsettling.
completed, like a sun figure for beating the first daycare mission, or a meat pretzel for beating the Fazbear Theater. However,
meat
after you
pretzel?
beat the game, there are some
Ah.
extra prizes to collect that are given
Ice
to you
cream?
at random when you replay a stage. Usually this is just extra plushies, models, or food. But sometimes you get posters, and one of these posters stood out above all the rest. It ends up on the back wall right next to the Faz Wrench entrance for the Princess Quest minigame. It's a poster promoting Fall Fest
1970. That
now,
was
to the FNAF community,
54
Fall Fest
years
is
ago.
nothing new. We first saw this name pop up almost 5 years ago in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC for the original Help Wanted.
You
It's a
didn't really talk a
Halloween-inspired
ton
event
about
full of
that.
attractions, rides, and of course, spooky versions
talked
of
about it a
all
good
our
bit, but
favorite
not a
characters
ton.
to fit in with the Halloween theme. But there is one crucial difference between this Fall Fest and the one we see on the poster from Help Wanted 2, the date. The banners around the Curse of Dreadbear hub world show
Honestly, I'm
this
surprised
event
there's no
taking
Five Nights at
place in
Freddy's
1983,
haunted, like,
but this new poster is from over
attraction
a decade before.
somewhere
This whole Fall
in real
Fest
life.
thing has clearly been running for a very long time. In fact, it's been running since before the earliest confirmed parts of the FNAF timeline. In the Silver Eyes, when Charlie is looking for news articles on Fredbear's Family Diner, she starts the search at 1979, seeming to imply that this was when the diner was founded. But that is 9 whole years
Before
after
Fall
this
Fest.
poster was published. And that's not all. Look at the design.
that's why I
of this
think it was a
poster. While
circus.
it's advertising Fall Fest, it's not inherently spooky like the event we see for the Curse of Dreadbear. Instead, it has autumnal elements, but it's mostly designed to look like an old two-toned circus poster,
autumnal?
complete with a giant
That's a
circus
word.
tent right in the middle. And this isn't the first time Steel Wool has offered us hints that circuses might be important to this franchise. There's the mini games in Help Wanted 2, like the Carousel and Fazablast. There's the circus
God, I'm
costumes that
playing
are down in the
Deltarune.
basement
I don't
of
want to think
Ruin.
about
There's even
carousels.
circus-themed Funko merch. Clearly, Steel Wool is beating us over the head with this circus thing for a reason. But why? Well, back in 2022, in the build-up to Security Breach's Xbox port, Steel Wool did an
Still
interview
haven't
with
played
Game
it.
Jolt to talk about how they made Security Breach, give some
Maybe I'll
updates
play
on
for my
Ruin's
birthday this year.
development, and
I don't
drop some
know.
little hints towards what might might be coming down the pipeline for them and the FNAF franchise. And when asked what kind of game they'd like to make in the future, they said this.
One thing that I've always
Circus game?
loved to do is get back to kind of like the origin of like Fazbear Entertainment, kind of
Circus.
how things were made.
Same here. I'd like to head further back into the 70s.
They want to create a game about the origins of Freddy's set in the 70s. Most of us at the time assumed this would just be Fredbear's Family Diner. But with all this circus
before
imagery
that.
popping up, it begs the question, what if Fredbear's Family Diner wasn't the origin of Freddy's? What if instead it was this circus? Fall Fest 1970.
Kinda
And once I
interesting that
realized
they mention it
things
now.
started to fall into place. This poster is the key to clarifying some massive holes in the FNAF timeline. It confirms a number of things we've been predicting for a while, and it shines a little more light on the franchise's latest villain.
Mimic.
Come to think of it, maybe this isn't such a small theory after all. Whoops. So, you better grab your popcorn, theorist, because the show is about to
editor's
begin, and I'm going to reveal
very
to you
similar
the
style.
true origins of Freddy's. But just before we get into that, I need to talk to you about something else that's really important.
Is
It's something
it gonna
you may
be
have seen if
a-
you watch our own sister location, Style Theory. But we have an exciting theorist event coming up. We are putting
the
on
the
a fashion show. It's
yeah.
called Creators in Fashion, and it is the first of its kind. Not just because a
And
fashion
Matt's
show has never
hosting
been
it.
done on YouTube before, although that is pretty cool, but because we're getting weird with it. How weird? Well, the first runway of the night is going to be FNAF themed. You heard that right. We've had FNAF games, a FNAF movie, a FNAF
Who's
cookbook,
gonna be
and now
in this?
FNAF is completing the theorist gauntlet and getting a FNAF runway. Although, if you've ever
But
bought a
this is the
high
first
quality
one.
FNAF merch, FNAF being high fashion may not be that surprising. But what might be surprising is what creators we have
High
planned for the event.
fashion?
It's called Creators in Fashion.
High
after all. So
fashion's
we wanted to
something
make sure
else.
we were spotlighting creators from all corners of the internet and make this one of a kind
High
event
fashion's
even
like
more
wearing a
special.
trash bag
We've got the
that
likes of
costs
ZHC,
$3,000.
Seek Discomfort, Cassie Ho, and Critical Role, all getting glammed
I've
up
heard
to
of Critical
strut their
Role
stuff.
in
We've got
ZHC.
Simply Nailogical providing nails for the event, and the whole thing is going to be commentated by Rosanna Pansino and Trisha Hirschberger. Talk about star power. But of course,
I
we couldn't
don't.
do a fashion show by theorists without
not an
some
insult to
weird
them.
little theorist antics
I'm
going on.
uncultured.
Besides the FNAF runway, we've also got dogs walking the runway. And
Oh?
no, I'm not just talking about Santi. I mean literal dogs
He's from
strutting
Food
up and
Theory, isn't
down.
he?
And I'm not lying to you when I say they look both adorable and fierce. Speaking of fierce, we've also got our amazingly talented host of Style Theory, Amy, taking center stage to co-host this event alongside the man that I know you've all been missing. That's right, Matt Pad is coming back to host this very,
He's
very
gonna get
special event.
quite
And to
the,
celebrate, we're going to be
applause.
drenching the man live on stage. Maybe it's
Isn't he
water,
still
maybe
doing
it's
GT
Nickelodeon
Live?
Slime. Who knows? You'll have to watch the stream to find out. So mark your calendars
When is
for
it?
April 25th at 2:30 p.m. PST.
Ah,
We're going to be
well,
going live right
I'm
here
gonna
on
be doing
Game
some
Theory.
birthday
So if you aren't
festivities. Not
already,
my
make
birthday,
sure you're
but-
subscribed because believe me, you do not want to miss
Literally
this.
around that
Amy has
time.
a lot more surprises for you guys up those lacy sleeves.
that's actually gonna be
remember,
tomorrow.
that's
This
April
video is going live on
25th,
24th.
2:30 p.m. PST right here on Game Theory. I'll
23
see you
hours
there.
after this
But
video
for
goes.
now,
Oh, that's
let's get off
Pacific.
the runway and head back to the circus. Now, I understand there may be
So
some
it's 2 hours
hesitancy
after
in me
this video.
changing up the entire beginning of the timeline.
Yeah,
Again,
that's
it's
a little
pretty
weird.
big claim. And while there have been a number of hints towards circuses throughout the games and books, it doesn't
Oh,
necessarily
actually,
mean that's
yeah,
where this whole
circus
thing
babies.
started. So, let's take a look at one of the more recent examples of the circus being hinted at, so I can
Oh,
show
wait a
you where I'm
minute.
coming
That
from.
does
In the
make a
basement
whole lot
of
of
the Ruined
sense.
DLC where you find the Mimic, there are 2 costumes hanging up, an old lady blackbird and an elephant dressed as a clown. In the game
Elephants
files,
are
there's
circus
also
animals?
a lion wearing a varsity
Also a
jacket.
circus
3
animal?
animals all associated with the circus. Elephants often
bird?
perform tricks, lions were regularly tamed by lion tamers, and while crows or blackbirds aren't traditionally circus
Yeah.
animals, they do often appear in circus-focused media like Disney's Dumbo. Plus, the elephant
Never
is
seen it.
literally dressed as a clown. It doesn't get more circusy than that. But the most important part isn't actually their circus theming. It's the fact they aren't animatronic suits. In our initial
And that they're
theory
just
on
suits
Ruin,
that
we
people
talked
wear.
about how these costumes seem to be related to circus babies because, you know, circus. However, when Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals, or even Circus Babies Pizza World was due to launch, they were all animatronics, and complex ones at that. Why then
Yeah.
would they have physical costumes? They
I
wouldn't
don't-
unless these costumes actually came from something circus themed
And they're
that
just
was
left
before
behind?
animatronics were part of this franchise. In the Mimic, not the robot, the Tales from the Pizza Flex story named after him, we
Not
learn of a
confusing
character
at all.
named Edwin who owns a robotics company, getting big off of making a robot vacuum cleaner. However, with the birth of his son, the death of his wife, and then the crippling pressure of running his own own business, he decides to sell the company to none other than Fazbear Entertainment. Why does Fazbear agree to purchase? Because they want Edwin for his
robot
robotics
vacuum
knowledge.
cleaners.
Specifically, they want him to turn their character costumes into full-blown animatronics. We've seen him do
Also, couldn't
exactly
he turn
this
things
with
to
Chica
life?
in the first few pages
Like,
of
quite
the story.
literally give them
Later on,
life?
he goes on to explain that this is the 18th character he'd been asked to create, describing the collection as, quote, a circus-like array of animal and other character costumes. Circus-like, you say? We believed for a long time that Edwin is the book's parallel for Henry, the animatronic genius that helped Afton to grow Fazbear into the animatronic empire we know today. So the circus-themed costumes we see in the basement of Ruin likely came from that same time period, a period where Henry was transforming costumes into animatronics. And these costumes aren't Henry's only connection to the circus either. When Charlie goes back to her childhood home in the Silver Eyes, she looks through Henry's office and finds an assortment of books that, quote, would have seemed eclectic to anyone who didn't know the man. There were books on biology and anatomy, some on human beings,
would he
others
want
on
that?
animals. There were books about the history of the traveling carnival and of the circus. There were books about
interesting
child development,
name drop
about
there.
myths and legends, and about sewing patterns and techniques. There were volumes that claimed to be about trickster gods, about quilting bees, about
Loki.
football cheering squads and their mascots. Most of these make a lot of sense. Things like anatomy, mascots, sewing patterns, it all ties into
Yeah,
the
that-
idea
that
he
does
was
make
creating
sense, but
characters
carnival and
turning
circus?
costumes into animatronics. The books about child development either tie into the fact that he was catering to kids and so was trying to figure out how he could best serve his customers, or it's linked to the human anatomy books and ties into Henry creating robot versions of his daughter Charlie. But there's one selection that has always stood out as odd, one that I've never had an explanation for, and that is the history of the traveling
like,
carnival
why?
and the circus. Why would Henry need books on that topic?
Maybe
if
because
all the
it's
work he's ever
entertainment?
done is on animatronics and diners.
Maybe he's like,
He needs it
hey.
because the origins of Fazbear are rooted in traveling circuses and carnivals. It was a hit.
Didn't what's-his-face
as to
fall in
the
love
first
with, like,
years
a
of
traveling
this
circus with
business.
the bear?
This circus, Full Fest,
That he got
seems
inspiration
to
for
be
Freddy?
where Fazbear Entertainment all began. But now the question is, who else was there? And I don't mean human characters. Let's be honest, we don't have many of them that are actually important, especially not back in 1970. I mean, which of the Fazbear characters were part of the original roster? As I've mentioned, during How Wanted 2, we get a number of minigames that take place in carnival-like settings, namely Fazablast and the Carousel. And it's the Carousel that I want us to take a look at first. The game itself is
think about
pretty
the Carousel.
straightforward. You know, when you don't have an Ash
the-
trying to desperately keep your microphone
Jevil?
attached. Oh my
Jevil?
god!
Yeah, Jevil.
Despite this,
Yeah,
Matt
that
did
thing.
manage to
Fell for
notice
it.
a very interesting detail in the level's design. A random pumpkin. Just sitting there, waiting to be thrown. I think we could all
Waiting to be
agree that
thrown?
pumpkins are something we specifically associate with Halloween. And the only event we know
True.
to take place at Halloween in this franchise is, you guessed it, Fall Fest. We even get a
Which is
Halloween-themed
pumpkins.
version of Moon appear during the nightmare level of the Carousel ride. The Carousel is from Fall Fest, which means it's from the early part of the franchise.
And you can
But
see what
then
characters
take a
are
look at
there.
the characters that are used on the Carousel. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, which, you know, is what you'd expect. Except it's
Yeah,
not
we're
just
missing-
the original versions from FNAF 1. The one that immediately stands out to me is this white and pink version of Foxy. Funtime Foxy? Well, kinda. Because you might also notice it has a hooked hand. Something that Funtime Foxy is clearly lacking in Sister Location.
Oh.
However, there is a version of Funtime Foxy with a hook hand. And that's in FNAF World, a game that came out before Sister Location and doesn't have any other Funtime animatronics present, implying that Funtime
I guess it
Foxy
was a-
didn't originally belong with that group of animatronics.
Are they just using a
Instead, belonging
character?
to an earlier set, and
Like
this
an unused
carousel
character?
tells us exactly which group that is. The other characters on this ride, besides Funtime Foxy and the original 4, all have rosy red cheeks, which aligns with the toy animatronics from FNAF 2. Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, and
still
Funtime
never
Foxy,
wanna play
the
FNAF
toy
2.
version of Foxy. The toy animatronics being here feels wrong, doesn't it? The toys don't become a thing until 1987 with their special recognition software and new, more complex endoskeletons. They replaced the old withered versions of the original Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy from the original Freddy's. How then are they on a ride from 1970? Well, this is because I don't think the toy animatronics are meant to call back to the 1983 Freddy's animatronics.
They're supposed to go back to the circus.
Referencing the original circus costumes. Going back to the Mimic story, once Edwin
That-
abandons the warehouse, Fazbear employees are sent in to collect any Fazbear property, things like their costumes. One character mentions a few of them: a brown Freddy Fazbear costume, a yellow
course.
Chica costume, a Foxy costume, a Bonnie costume. The original 4 were all in existence as costumes before their introduction
Before they were
as animatronics at Freddy Fazbear's
Because
Pizza.
they were
What's
in
even
the circus.
crazier is the designs of those
But
costumes
when did
actually
circuits
exist.
need
a few years ago,
costumes
there was a
like
let's
that?
just say controversial, but at the time, official FNAF artist that dropped an image onto the FNAF subreddit with zero context or explanation. The only thing we knew is that these images contained Scott's official copyright. These images were
Oh.
commissioned by Scott, which makes them as good a
How are
piece
you
of
able to
evidence
drop
as any.
this?
And what are these images of? Versions of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica in a similar style to the mascot costumes you'd find at a theme park like Disneyland, all with large proportions and big round heads in order to have a human fit inside them. These appear to be the original costumes for the characters. And where were these costumes used? I suspect
At
they
a
were worn
circus?
at the circus. Why? Well,
But
notice the bright
why
red
were they
cheeks.
used-
Exaggerated features like big red noses or cheeks
I
have been used by
don't even know if
clowns
I've
and
been to a
circus
circus.
performers
I feel like I
for
have, but
centuries.
I also feel
Joseph
like I
Grimaldi
haven't.
is recognized as being the ancestor for modern clowns, and in 1802 he created the design for his most iconic character, Joey the Clown. And one of this
Never
character's
heard of
iconic
him.
features was painted red cheeks. Similarly, Albert Fratellini is known to have helped redefine a type of clown in the
With a big
mid-1900s
nose?
known as the August Clown, complete
Big-
with the
big
bright
red
red
nose,
nose
yep.
we know today. Why did both these performers feel it necessary to have bright red features for the evolution of the clown? Because
Eye-catching.
when the word clown was first recorded in 1560, it meant rustic, poor, or peasant. This often boiled down to one simple stereotype: the town drunk, who you would often see
Have a
after
red
you had a bit
nose.
too much to drink, with a bright red nose and red cheeks.
Okay.
This happens when your body isn't able to digest alcohol properly, causing a release of histamines that essentially cause your face to have an allergic reaction, namely red cheeks and nose.
I
The
didn't
idea of
actually know
referencing
that.
this was to make clowns or characters immediately look foolish, silly, or
What was
disarming.
that sound
so
effect? Was that
people would be
Yoshi?
quicker to laugh at them rather than be scared of them, which is pretty ironic when you think about it. That is why I believe
There's still
these
people who are
costumes
scared of
circus
clowns.
costumes. Not because they're trying to make characters look like drunks, that wouldn't be very child friendly. It was to invoke those same reactions of silly, goofy fun. And the kicker is you can see this trait carried over into the most definitively circus costume we've got available. Elephant costume down in
with
the ruined basement. Usually you
looking
don't
like a
get a
clown,
chance to see them up close,
rosy
but
cheeks.
freeze the frame just right,
There's
or,
a red
you know,
nose.
search the game files, and you'll find that although a little faded, it too has rosy red cheeks. So red-cheeked characters, like the ones we see in these designs, would have been right at home at a circus, which also opens up the door to other red-cheeked characters from this franchise to potentially be part of the original roster. Maybe characters that weren't originally animal
Oasis
costumes, but
roster.
more likely humans wearing the same kind of face
No.
paint. Case in point, Balloon Boy. Balloon Boy
No,
has
be
never
gone.
really fit in anywhere. We turned on FNAF 2 and he was just there,
Nope.
and we've hated him ever since.
Thank you.
Said, read the.
In the movie, the only
But
jump
it's
scares in the
curated for
movie.
his own arcade cabinet, Balloon World. And if you
It's
played
such
that
a good
game,
movie.
you'd see a circus tent in the background. Balloon Boy's only standalone adventure places him at the circus. But while he never fit in with FNAF 2's characters, he did have a striking resemblance
And that's
to
why
a
he's
handful
there.
of characters in Sister Location and Circus Baby.
I streamed
Other
that on my
wooden
last
puppets
birthday.
like
That
the
was
magician
wild.
and fortune teller, all jobs that would be found at a circus. Selling balloons was an important part of any circus, so Balloon Boy with his little sign offering them to
Really
children
sell
would be
balloons?
right at home with the rest of them. And to top it all off, when Funko decided to release their new circus line of FNAF products, it contained not just clown versions of all the characters, but versions of all of them
But-
wearing Balloon Boy's iconic
But do
outfit.
they-
We were being shown that balloon characters, and specifically that outfit,
Do you think
are
Funko
inherently
knows?
tied to the circus. Balloon Boy has to be a part of this. Full Fest is where he finally makes sense. Another example would be Circus Baby. She's been showing up a lot in recent games, just like the circus imagery. So
Oh,
it
no.
feels like Steel Wool are purposely trying to connect the two. She's also got the red cheeks we've talked about, as well as that white face.
I mean,
paint
she's
that we
literally
see on
called
most
Circus
traditional
Baby.
Clowns. She'd fit right in at a circus. Plus, you know, she's literally got circus in her name.
Yeah.
Maybe this character, whose placement in the timeline has perplexed us for so long,
came from the
belongs
circus
way
as well.
earlier in the franchise's history than any of us expected. But above those two, in the books, there is one other costume that gets called out. The core four, but always one more. A jester costume. Now, I'm sure Matt is once again freaking out because jesters aren't clowns and they aren't part of a circus. And
I
dude,
guess they're
get
not,
it, but just
but-
trust me on this. In that quote,
Yeah,
from the
he
Mimic story
went on a
about
whole
graphic
tirade
costumes,
about that,
after
didn't he?
listing off the main four characters we know and love, they finish off by adding, and bright pink, yellow, green court jester costumes, similar to the colors we see Sun wearing in Security
I
Breach.
do
Yeah,
not
I know
like.
they're a little off, but they're pretty close. And just look at the rest of his costume: curly, pointed toes with bells, puffy trousers or pants, I suppose, and the tutu-like frills on his
Pants.
waist and ankles. He is 100% meant to be a court jester.
Oh,
he even
yeah.
jumps out of a freaking castle when we first meet him in security breach. And as Matt was very keen to point out, Jesters originated as performers for royalty in their castles during the Middle Ages. Finally, there's
What was
the
funny
epilogues,
about
where
that?
the Jester character once again returns. But this time, we get a description of its mask. Quote, Lucia stepped up to the costume, suppressing a shiver at the Jester's leering, toothy grin and its wide eyes. One of Sun's most distinct features is his obnoxious, toothy grin. It's so iconic that he had to have teeth underneath his
Just
teeth,
like the
just
Mimic.
in case. And those large, vacant eyes definitely give off that leering vibe that Lucia was describing. So, even though Sun doesn't have the red cheeks like
Not a
talked about,
fan.
he still appears to be very
Not a fan of Sun in real life
obviously
either.
connected to the original crew,
It
Freddy,
burns me.
Chica, Foxy, and Bonnie, as well as the Circus. He is the last one mentioned when they're all being listed off, as if the costumes were grouped together, like they came from the same collection of characters. Characters that came from Fazbear's Circus days. Sun and Moon actually make a lot of sense as characters in a traveling circus. In the Tale story Bobby Dots, we get a bit of
'Cause I guess they work
much-needed
together.
backstory on this character.
Maybe
who
they're like
just
rivals.
Showed up in Security Breach,
And they
not
do, like,
matching any of
slapstick.
the 80s-tastic designs of the Pizzaplex. It turns out they weren't always a daycare attendant, but instead a performer. They put on shows where Sun would be the hero, and when the lights went out, Moon would appear as the story's villain. That ties into the comedy and tragedy masks that we found in Ruin, masks that display Sun and Moon's face. So it would have also been an ideal performance to keep kids entertained at a circus venue. And later on, when the daycare was introduced, that same Bobby Dot story describes the daycare's design as a carnival-like space, hammering home the connection to the character's origins. And then the icing on the cake, during Help Wanted 2, he is the one we face when we're trying to fix the carousel from those old Fall Fest days. He's
That-
been
it's
there
so
since
scary.
the start. And when you think about it, in the early days of the franchise, when you're trying to keep costs down, buying a full mascot costume or fursuit from a trusted provider can cost upwards of $5,000, while costumes for professional jesters and clowns are typically just a few $100, keeping costs nice and low when you're first
How do you
starting out.
even,
It
like,
really feels
find
like
that?
The circus origin is helping characters that are out of
Like,
place have a place to finally belong. Sun and Moon, Baby, Balloon Boy, all of them will be
What is-
right at
how
home
big
at
is the
circus.
Jester
However,
industry?
Fall Fest isn't just the origins of the Fazbear franchise. It's also the origins of William Afton's first major tragedy. Fazablast in Help Wanted 2 is a shooting gallery that matches the design of the hub world during the Curse of Dreadbear DLC. Dreadbear even makes an appearance at the attraction, so this attraction clearly takes place during Fall Fest 1983. However, the
that the
penultimate
587? No.
Fazablast level ends with you shooting a number of rockets and popping all the balloon versions of the animatronics that appear.
Balloons.
Doing so seems to cause a chain reaction that leads to the whole thing ending up in flames. And when you go back for the final level, the place is burnt to the ground. We see the same thing happen during
yet
the
again, the
carousel.
show
As
talking
you try
about
to
burning
fix it,
things to the
sparks
ground.
fly and the thing lights up, leading to the nightmare version of the level where the
Nightmare,
whole
nightmare,
place is
nightmare.
already ablaze. And if you go out of bounds during that carousel level, you can see the red sky, burnt trees, water tower, and windmill that are all present during that final Fazablast level off in the distance. Steel Wool is clearly showing us that much like every other establishment
Everything
in
burns
this
to the
franchise,
ground.
this event, Fall Fest 1983, ended in fire.
Everything.
1983 sucked for this franchise, but especially for Afton. He loses his kid to a malfunctioning Springlock suit and his other son's negligence.
Maybe that's what
Fredbear's
broke
family
him.
diner gets
Maybe
shut
it's just
down, and to
bad
top it
thing
all
after
off,
bad
he
thing
loses
after
the
bad
thing that
thing.
started this whole
They're just
business
piled up,
of
and he's
circus.
just like,
Steel Wool is
"That's
all
it.
about a sympathetic villain
getting me mallet."
backstory.
Try not to set out to make a cool looking villain. Go make a monster that have a reason for it. These aren't just like these supernatural forces that came out of nowhere to just hurt people and punish people, right? Like there were results of other wrongdoing.
Adding a fire to an already pretty awful list of tragedy and loss, it would
Yeah.
make it a little less surprising that Afton could suddenly snap and go on a murder spree. But this fire tells us more than just how this
whole
first
lot of
chapter
bad
in
things
FNAF history
happening.
ended. It also tells us that there was one other character here, someone else present from the beginning that you wouldn't suspect, the Mimic. Yeah, I know, I was
no.
surprised too, but everything seems to be pointing to this guy being here since the earliest days of the franchise. We
don't
get
like
a lot
that.
of different descriptions for the Mimic during the epilogues of Tales from the Pizzaplex. Sometimes it's a traditional endoskeleton, other times it's a spider-like mess of slimy black wires. But when we are first introduced to it, we're given one extra detail. A detail that I never fully understood. Quote, it wasn't just a basic metal structure. Its steel frame was contained within a building collection of metal rods and curved plates and an impressive system of ball joints and pistons. All of it was topped with a
Pistons?
long, vaguely
Really?
rectangular-shaped, shiny steel skull. The skull was the only part that was shiny. The rest was dark and discolored, as if it had survived some kind of fire. That's a pretty specific way of
survived
phrasing
a
it,
fire.
especially when it points out that the head isn't blackened by the same issue. We're being given a clue clue as to where this mimic came from, because the other detail that's important to bear in mind is that quote comes
So
from
what is it, the
very
only
start of
survivor?
the story, when the endoskeleton first arrives at the pizza
Or does it
place.
always
It
come
was
back?
delivered to this location already burned.
Maybe it's a
which
mimic
tells us
of,
that it had to be in a previous
Afton.
Fazbear fire, and I believe that fire was the fire of Full Fest. But what makes me so sure that the mimic got all burned during that fire specifically? Here's the thing. I know we always joke that everything in this franchise ends in fire, but we can actually count the number of fires on one hand, even if you're an animatronic with only 4 fingers. Which means
is there
it
4
shouldn't
of them?
be too difficult to go through each one and determine which one the mimic came from. Working backwards, there's a fire at the end of Security Breach if you beat the burn trap ending. Afton is defeated, the blob steals him away, and the entire
Yoink.
pizzaplex catches fire and collapses. But as we've talked about before, it doesn't seem like this is the canon ending for
Yeah, no,
Security
I think
Breach.
we
find
kinda confirmed
Gregory's
that it's
drawings for
not.
the non-canon endings during Ruin,
Yeah.
and the last one we collect is his drawing of the burn trap ending, which means this fire wasn't a real fire. And even if it was, this ending takes place at the pizzaplex, so the mimic couldn't have been delivered to the pizzaplex burnt from a
burned
fire,
already,
as the burn trap
if it-
ending
yeah.
comes later in the timeline. Second option is the
Valid.
FNAF 6 fire, but once again we face issues with timeline. The pizzaplex is being built on top of the FNAF 6 location, which means the mimic wouldn't be able to be delivered to that location when the pizzaplex is being constructed, like we see in the book, because it would have already been there. The only other fire left other than Full Fest is the FNAF 3 fire, but the owners of Fazbear Fright seemed pretty stoked when they found their first working animatronic, Springtrap. Up until this point, they'd only had bits and pieces like a foxy head. So it feels like they'd have also made a pretty big deal of finding a mimic, bringing it back to the location, even if they thought
Maybe
it was
it was
just
hiding,
an ender.
though.
So it doesn't feel like it can be that one either, which leaves only one fire for the mimic to have been burnt in, the fire of Full Fest 1983, meaning the mimic has been around for a long time.
very long
We actually
time.
theorized this back when we covered Sun and Moon after the events of Ruin. We connected the mimics thrown together, thin, simple animatronic design to that of Sun and Moon, namely a
Which would
very
explain
weird,
because
distinct
they're from
feature,
the circus.
independently moving teeth. It's a strange design detail that we've never seen before.
And
so for
only
both
they have it in
actors to have
common.
The same detail in the same game makes
That's
it seem
actually
like
brilliant.
they have to be connected in some way. And if Sun and Moon come from the early Full Fest origins of the franchise, then the
So
mimic,
mimic.
being around at the same time would explain that connection.
So
But
what
there's
was
one
the
more
mimic's
detail that
purpose in
tells
the
you that the
circus?
mimic has to have been around during the Full Fest era of FNAF, something that's been right under our noses for years. For a while now, we've believed that the glitch trap virus in Help Wanted 1, the virus that takes the shape of a yellow bunny rabbit and takes over Vanessa's mind, isn't actually William Afton himself, but instead a version of the mimic program that is mimicking Afton's behavior. In the game,
Did I
we
not
heard
say
about Fazbear
it's a mimic
trying
of
to keep
him?
costs down for this new game they're developing.
I mean, they sent us that stuff in the first place with no explanation, told us to scan it, said it would expedite the process so we wouldn't need to program any pathfinding ourselves. It
but
was
it's
a
really
budget
just a
thing, I
mimic
guess.
telling
it was
them
just
that.
junk, circuit boards and things like that. Look pretty old.
That game was Help Wanted. It's an in-universe game that takes the original FNAF games and turns them into new VR experiences, which is exactly what we learn happened to the Mimic program in The Storyteller. Quote, it's a simple template-style software that takes previously created stories and rearranges them into new scenarios for VR, AR, and arcade games. That is what Glitch Trap is. The Mimic program, having been scanned into the system, gets a crash course in Afton's murdery tendencies and is now mimicking it. Hence, he appears as Afton's
Because he-
iconic
yeah, 'cause he
yellow
learned
rabbit.
it.
Except
Because if you
there's one
give
part
an
of this
AI
explanation
bad
that never
data-
sat right with me. If the Glitch Trap mimic was learning about Afton from the in-universe games of FNAF 1 to 6, then why does he take this form? Afton in all of those games, even in the 8-bit minigames, is always wearing his spring
Maybe he was
suit,
planned.
because that was the costume he wore at
Maybe
Fredbear's Family
Mimic was
Diner.
supposed
But
to
the
mimic
version of
Afton
suit
from the
that
very
Mimic
beginning.
shows us as Glitch Trap is a completely different design, and at the time, we'd never seen this version before. This isn't his Springlock suit. It's a hand-sewn suit with plastic-looking facial features
Maybe when he worked for
similar
the
to
circus.
ones we saw on that concept art. Those suits came from Full Fest, and so it would make sense for this hand-sewn golden rabbit suit to have also come from the same time period. But for the Mimic to have been able to copy this design, it would have to have some memory of this
And maybe
version of
that's-
Afton in its memory banks prior to being uploaded to the Help Wanted game system. It would have to have observed Afton perform in this iconic golden rabbit costume alongside a golden singing bear at Full Fest. The Mimic would have to be around during the early costume days
Also,
of the
that's
franchise.
wild,
Tape
because
Girl
that's
did
a
say
very
the circuit
old, like,
boards looked
computer.
pretty old after all.
It was just junk, Circuit boards and things like that.
Like,
Look pretty old.
Maybe the
the
mimic was
80s?
originally meant to mimic Afton specifically. I'm not entirely sure of this, to be honest.
Well,
but
he
it
tried to
does
make
feel like this is where the
animatronics.
clues might be heading. Both Fall Fest and
Well,
the diner were open until 1983, after all. So they
the
coexisted
easiest
for at least
way
4
to
years, with the diner opening in 1979. And we know that Afton was
Make it
performing
mimic
his
yourself.
Bonnie at the diner. So it's possible that the mimic was
To
part
make an
of Afton's
animatronic.
plan to expand the business. He could literally be in 2 places at once. Eventually, the mimic would be locked underground, with some circuit boards containing its programming set aside just in case. And when the mimic software was finally used again to help speed up the process of a new VR game, it was shown all of those old FNAF games. And while it watched and learned, it recognized someone, William Afton, the golden rabbit.
Which is
from
wild
the
that he
circus.
was able
And so
to
decided to take on
remember
the form
that,
it remembered
or recognize.
all those years ago, creating the monster we have spent
Maybe
the
that's
last
the first
3
impression.
games and 2 DLCs trying to stop. But hey, that's just a theory. A game
A very
theory.
interesting
Thanks
game
for
theory.
watching.
For his first theory, this is good. There's a lot of insight to this. Okay, puzzle vision. What in the world? So, I think he tried to make it like mimic himself. Like he tried to teach the mimic to be an animatronic, and the mimic was the very first animatronic. And instead of having to program things, it basically learned off of watching William Afton. And maybe it witnessed William Afton, like, murder people? And that's where it got the tendencies from. Maybe it watched him become an evil person and do bad things, and then it ended up doing bad things. Maybe William Afton isn't responsible for all of the kills and murders. Maybe some of them were the mimic pretending to be William Afton. That's just my little game theory. I don't know. This is a longer video. I think he did a fantastic job covering this and taking over the reins for Matt. I'm sure Matt is still behind the scenes putting in a little bit of his input as well. But I look forward to watching more of these videos. Like I said, I'm doing the Minecraft game theory videos right now every single Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Patrons get them a day early. I hope you're subscribed to those future videos. Let me know what you think down below in the comment section, because I do read every single one of your comments. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. But until next video, take care and cue the music.
We were playing